the chair. Tēnā koutou to the
not
select
overwhelmed,
committee.
but like
My name is
passionate.
Kirsty Fong with me.
Yeah. Okay, let's kick off with the submission because it's really good.
Zufu,
Yep.
and we are here
I like
representing
you too,
Asians
Chrissy.
supporting Tino Rangatiratanga. We are a national organisation of tau iwi from diverse backgrounds who support the restoration of Māori Indigenous sovereignty. Many of our communities have migrated or been displaced because of colonialism and imperialism in our homelands and beyond. As tau iwi, we have been afforded the opportunity and privilege to live in Aotearoa by virtue of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We start our submission on the inalienable fact that Māori have never ceded sovereignty and ground our submission in the full text of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We oppose this bill because it desecrates Te Tiriti, a sacred and generous agreement that allows immigration to these lands under the clear condition of protection and respect for Tino Rangatiratanga. This bill is dishonourable in its distortion of the language of equality to erase Indigenous rights and further violates Te Tiriti. This bill, although not passed, is already causing division and emboldening racial discrimination towards Māori, including in our communities, and it will continue to do so if not stopped. This bill distracts from the urgent issues of the climate crisis and resurgence of fascism across the world, stemming from the centuries of colonial and racial capitalism. Furthermore, the Crown has not consulted or negotiated with all parties to Te Tiriti around this bill and cannot unilaterally redefine the meaning of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi.
Now, hold on, sorry. This is what happens.
Meanwhile, this bill denies Tino Rangatiratanga for Māori in the first two proposed principles in order to cement Crown sovereignty and limit the scope of Māori political power. Professor Margaret Mutu defines Tino Rangatiratanga as a paramount authority, and what was granted to the Crown was kawanatanga, a delegated authority to have a governor to manage their own people and those to come. The Crown was never granted power to govern over Māori, who long have had their own political structures and independent nationhood. Proposed principles do not reflect the Articles of Te Tiriti. We see the underlying agenda of this bill is far from equality, but the removal of barriers for corporate interests and extractive industries to further exploit Māori land. We find the prioritising of short-term profit in the midst of urgent climate catastrophes a devastating betrayal to rangatahi and future generations who will face even worse environmental crises.
We also want to briefly speak to the history of the Crown trying to put a wedge between Asian and Māori peoples. For example, this includes the anti-miscegenation efforts to prevent interrelationships between Māori and Chinese and the unofficial white New Zealand policies restricting Asian immigration. Our solidarities are threatening to the existing colonial order. We see the continuation of these divisive strategies in the ways that multiculturalism is used to recruit Asians into a sinister anti-Māori agenda. The party has been spreading treaty disinformation in Asian communities, such as in Chinese New Year festivals and gurdwaras and feigns care for migrant communities to pit us against Māori. Liberal multiculturalism undermines Tino Rangatiratanga and subsumes Māori as just another ethnic minority group amongst others, which conveniently erases indigeneity and denies tapu and iwi rightful political power. Indigeneity is not wholly about race. It is also a deep and unseverable relationship to land that colonisation has sought to destroy. This is an important distinction that our communities understand.
But despite the divide and rule tactics, we have long begun forming direct relationships where there are many beautiful stories and histories of mutual aid and care. Matua Mona Jackson has shared some of these stories with us, including some from his own whānau. Our own relationships with tangata whenua are also testament to these solidarities, and our experience at the Hikoi shows glimpses into what Aotearoa could be on a larger scale, showing the power of refusing to be divided by white supremacy. Throughout the Hikoi, we were met with warmth and manaakitanga and hosted by Māori friends around the country. People of Māori and Asian whakapapa came up to us and shared their stories. They reminded us that our communities are not separate, but interdependent, and that our liberation is therefore interlinked.
And counter to the divisive intentions of the bill, we have come together. When we have offered accurate and translated information to our communities, our peoples have all expressed desires to uphold their responsibilities in honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi. When we organised collaborative submission parties across the country, both in person and online, we saw full house attendance from migrant and refugee communities. We have seen our communities take the initiative to provide informative and engaging translations about Te Tiriti o Waitangi in a growing number of languages. Our belonging in Aotearoa is contingent on honouring Te Tiriti. All peoples in Aotearoa have responsibilities to uphold Tino Rangatiratanga, to live in interdependence, where we can be strong in who we are. We have been strengthening cross-community solidarity against colonialism and against racism so that we can move forward together to a just future that is honourable and good for all.
This bill must be stopped. We call on the government to comprehensively reject this bill and abandon other bills that seek to undermine Te Tiriti and Māori rights. Instead, we call on the government to focus on implementing the visions for constitutional transformation in the Mataki Mai Aotearoa report, which will actually bring about meaningful equality and justice for all of us. Toi tū he whakaputanga, toi tū Te Tiriti.
Thank you, Kirsty. Members, any questions?
Yes.
Māori meno kapakingi.
Thank you. Tēnā koe, Kirsty, tēnā koutou katoa. You, somewhere in your discussion, which links directly to your submission, you talk about Tino Rangatiratanga is not just a Māori take. It is a shared commitment to justice for all. And hearing the sentiment and the directness in your discussion this morning, kānui te mihi kia koutou. It is so helpful for the committee to hear you and see you. I'd like if you could just, to help the committee even more, in the statement, it is a shared commitment to justice for all. Can you just talk a little bit more so the committee can get a further layer of what that statement means for you?
Absolutely. Do you want to go? Okay. Well, we see that racism in this country stems from the history of colonial racism and the treatment of Māori. And all other racisms as migrants that we experience are connected to that foundational violence of colonialism. If we do not address that foundational violence, there can be no racial justice for any of us.
Thank you. Members, any more questions? There appear to be none. Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for...
I like Charlene's comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's why I threw it up on screen. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's not just a Māori, I've lost the word, I'm just going to say problem of your manaakitanga and Tino Rangatiratanga and kawanatanga. It is something that the entire nation needs to embrace and work towards. We are divided as a nation until we can do this.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Jordon?
I want to hear your whakaaro first because my own family married into and they've done really well in the what do you call it, marakai,
You make it sound like
gardens in Waitara and
you're from Waitara. Oh well, your roots are from Waitara. Oh God, that is very
My
small.
great grandmother was born in Purangi on the Waitara River, but we call it the Awaroa River out there in Ngāti Maru. But yeah, I lived in Waitara for quite some time, and the Ki Sioux whānau, they whakapapatu me on the Whakaruru line, and they were migrants that came here that married into my own whakapapa, and their father did very well as a market farmer. But he didn't just do it for himself. He did it for his community. He did it for his whānau, because even though he wasn't Māori, he became a Māori because he married a Māori, and then he became a part of our whānau. And they had
I know
four or five children, I think.
Yeah. I know the Tartaners in Levin are a mixed Māori Chinese family, and it's literally just the way that happened.
And they're also the grey whānau in Waitangi.
Yeah.
And
let's
what's his
kick
name,
off
Sue?
with the last name Sue. I know is a Levin Market Gardener last name. I do actually know that because I've got a stall at Newtown Market.